I f***ed up.
Bankman-Fried wrote in his testimony before he was arrested.
I know that it doesn't mean much to say that I'm sorry. And so I'm dedicating as much of myself as I can to doing right by customers. When all is said and done, I'll judge myself primarily by one metric, whether I have eventually been able to make customers whole.
SBF started his planned testimony with an apology and regret. However, after we reviewed the 18 pages of paper, we discover a totally different story. This is V-Circle Future. In SBF's planned testimony, he admitted to making some mistakes in his management of FTX, citing a lack of time as a factor.
I believe I was spending approximately 25% of my time talking with regulators and policymakers in DC and beyond, 25% of my time on branding and new pathways for FTX, including remittances, financial settlement, and sports partnerships, 25% of my time managing FTX's growing workforce. Together, those were maybe 25% of my time in 2020, but by 2022 they were closer to 75%. That time wasn't spent focusing on the actual core product, including risk management.
However, he also planned to spend much of his testimony blaming others for the company's implosion and the current situation he finds himself in. Here is a list of who and what Bankman-Fried planned to blame for his company's demise. The biggest blame is the unfavorable market downturn.
In late 2021, I believe that Alameda Research likely had a net asset value of substantially over $50 billion, mark to market. As tightening monetary policy, a war, and supply chain problems hit throughout 2022, asset price crashed. I believe that Alameda's assets fell by roughly 90% over the course of the year.
He also claimed the crash in November was not a broad market crash, and so Alameda's hedges didn't work.
By the fall of 2022, I believe that Alameda Research had a margin position of roughly $8 billion and likely had roughly $8 billion of hedges. However, the crash that occurred in November 2022 was not a broad market crash or even a broad crypto market crash. From November 7th to November 9th, Bitcoin was down roughly 17% and equities markets were roughly flat, but many of Alameda's assets were down more than 50%. And so Alameda's hedges didn't work.
It can explain that Alameda's action to dump Tether at a trade size of $250,000, probably as part of its hedging plan. The goal was to pull down Tether and trigger a broad market crash, which would help Alameda's hedge to work. But he failed to depeg the Tether. SBF accused CZ of leading a month of sustained negative PR on FTX, which he believes led to a bank run on the company and its eventual collapse.
Alameda's assets fell precipitously in value beginning on November 6, 2022, hours after Binance CEO tweeted his intent to sell his holdings in FTT. The run on the bank was triggered by the same tweet by Binance CEO. Alameda's hedges failed in November 2022 because the crash was specific to its hedges, triggered by the PR campaign by CZ.
Bankman-Fried also planned to criticize Binance for signing a letter of intent to acquire FTX, which he claims inhibited him from responding to other potential investors who could have provided capital to customers. He said he learned via Twitter that Binance was backing out of the deal, and believes that the company never intended to go through with it. Next on the blame list is John Ray. SBF claimed that he nominated Ray as the CEO of various FTX entities, but that Ray is not the CEO of FTX International.
At roughly 4:30 a.m. on November 10, 2022, against my better judgment, I clicked on a DocuSign link that would nominate John Ray as the CEO of various FTX entities. But he is not CEO of the primary operating entity of FTX International. I believe that U.S. customers' assets were successfully safeguarded, could be made whole immediately. When John Ray became CEO of FTX US on November 10, 2022, FTX US was still operational and still processing customer withdrawals. I have reached out to Mr. Ray and the Chapter 11 team numerous times. Sometimes I've been requesting access to my own data, but other times I've been attempting to alert them to potentially important information for their jobs and duties to creditors and customers of FTX. I have sent 5 emails to Mr. Ray. He has not responded, for instance, to an email of mine that stated, "I have potentially pertinent information concerning future opportunities and financing for FTX and its creditors." I also believe that I have relevant financial information about FTX US, and further that I have potentially relevant regulatory information concerning FTX. I would love to talk to you, whether it's via email or phone, and to work constructively with you and the Chapter 11 team to do what's best for customers.
He disagreed. John Ray's various statements in filings.
John Ray stated that the dilutive minting of approximately $300 million in FTT tokens by an unauthorized source after the petition date. This statement is bizarre. And also John Ray complained about the failure of the co-founders and potentially others to identify additional wallets believed to contain debtor assets. To my knowledge, no such wallets exist.
SBF also planned to blame Sullivan Cromwell, a bankruptcy law firm, for the events that followed the collapse of FTX. He claimed that the firm pressured him to file for Chapter 11 and filed the documents despite his instructions not to.
I have 19 pages of screenshots of Sullivan Cromwell, Mr. Miller, and others I believe were influenced by them, all sent over a 2-day period, pressuring me to quickly file for Chapter 11. They ranged from adamant to mentally unbalanced. They also called many of my friends, co-workers, and family members, pressuring them to pressure me to file, some of whom were emotionally damaged by the pressure. Some of them came to me, crying.
Bankman-Fried also alleged that Sullivan Cromwell and John Ray, the current CEO of FTX, have not released funds for FTX US customers and have a financial motive for doing so. He claimed that the law firms that represented Enron in its bankruptcy were paid $700 million in fees, and accused Sullivan Cromwell of not representing the interests of FTX's creditors.
Needless to say, Sullivan and Cromwell has not made sure that we are all represented through this. They have, however, done a good job of making sure they were wired $4 million.
SBF also attacked Ryan Miller, the general counsel of FTX US, for being part of the pressure campaign to file for Chapter 11. He shared a text from Miller in which he asked for $4 million in legal fees for Sullivan and Cromwell, and claimed that Miller was in cahoots with the law firm. Bankman-Fried also alleged that Miller told him that a capital raise was a 0% likelihood and that there was nothing to save FTX. These statements suggest that Miller believed that it was unlikely that the company could be saved and that filing for Chapter 11 was the best option. Last one on the blame list is an accounting quirk. SBF said that the company's dashboard did not accurately show the size of the holdings of Alameda Research, its sister trading arm, and that he now believes that Alameda's position was over twice as large as what was displayed on the dashboard. Bankman-Fried blamed the failure of multiple internal controls on this historical accounting quirk and said that he based his periodic assessments of the riskiness of FTX's positions on the numbers shown on the dashboard. At the end of his testimony, SBF lists several claims he thought are false. Like, he manipulated the stablecoin Tether in the wake of the November 2022 crash. Caused the implosion of Three Arrows Capital this year. Stashed away billions of dollars personally, etc. Okay, after read all these blames, we almost covered most of SBF's planned testimony before he was arrested. Let me know what's your thought on his claims in the comment below. This is V Circle Future. Thanks for your watching.